Lugia has a notorious problem. If you're not aware, its typing is largely considered questionable at best and wrong at worst. It's a psychic flying type. Most people can agree on the flying half, but psychic instead of water? It always felt a bit odd. Lugia undeniably has a connection to water. According to an article from Web Anime Style, Lugia was originally designed with symbolism for the deep ocean current in mind. During the time of the Johto games, it resides in the Whirl Islands, which are located in the ocean. In order to summon it, you would need the tidal bell, an item clearly connected to the seas. Additionally, Lugia naturally learns the moves Rain Dance and Hydro Pump. In the Pokédex, Lugia is even referred to as the diving Pokémon. On top of that, Lugia is referred to as the Guardian of the Seas in its original Silver Pokédex entry, as well as Fire Red and White. Apparently, Lugia was made to be a psychic type in order to make a stronger impression, according to Bulbapedia. I suppose that worked because I wouldn't be making this video otherwise. Most people would amend Lugia's typing in one of two ways. They would either make it a water flying type, or water psychic with levitate. These two solutions might not be as flawless as they seem at first glance. To address the water psychic idea, I'd argue that the flying type should be retained. Flying type is appropriate because Lugia is clearly flying in its in-game depictions. Giving it levitate, though, does somewhat cover this issue. In fact, it's a classic solution whenever a Pokemon feels like it should have three types. Flygon, having fly in its name, deserves some connection to flight. It should keep its ground typing due to its design being based on an antlion. The dragon typing is, well, pretty sick and cool, and so is Flygon. And antlions also resemble dragonflies, which have dragon in their name, so that could strengthen the need for the dragon typing. At the same time though, Flygon is clearly flying. Slap levitate on him and he gets the signature ground immunity of flying types. Making a ROM hack and you want Charizard to be Fire Dragon? Chances are you'll be tempted to give it levitate because it has wings. Additionally, players might be accustomed to its ground immunity in vanilla games. So why shouldn't Lugia get this treatment? The levitate solution disregards Lugia's signature move, Aeroblast. Not to be confused with Lugia Beam, apparently. With Aeroblast's impressive base power, high crit chance, and the fact that it's being used by a Pokemon with legendary base stats, you could certainly argue that it doesn't need Stab to make it worthwhile. But it's the signature move. Come on, thematically it should match the user's type, right? My very flimsy Aeroblast argument aside, Lugia should have the flying type. Earlier I referenced Pokédex entries to support its water type vibe. You could do the same to support its flying type identity. The dexes mention Lugia's ability to control storms. Storms are more than simply their aquatic aspects of rain and waves. They include intense winds. The dexes also reference how powerful a flap of Lugia's wings could be. This all illustrates Lugia as a flying type. So far I've given some decent arguments for why Lugia has characteristics of a water type and a flying type. That said, I don't think Lugia should simply be water flying. As for why a water flying typing isn't the best idea, we have to examine another legendary conundrum. Groudon and Kyogre, the box art legendaries of the Hoenn games. They're counterparts to each other, so it makes sense that their typings would be opposites in some way. However, this means that one has an inherent advantage over the other. Instead of balance, the thematic juxtaposition of land versus sea results in what most would consider to be a clear victory for the sea. In Emerald, the game set them up as equals in their fight. That said, it's a well-known meme in the Pokemon community that a lot of people assume Groudon would lose pretty terribly. It's on a relatively small patch of land, surrounded by water, going against a legendary water type as a ground type. If you fail to be immersed in the game and caught up in the cataclysmic moment, you could quickly realize there is potentially very little actual tension here. I, however, am a Groudon defender, and I refuse to believe that the battle will be so predetermined. Let's put it to the test. In Emerald, you encounter Groudon at level 70 with the moveset of Fire Blast, Fissure, Rest, and Solar Beam. You encounter Kyogre also at level 70 with the moveset Hydro Pump, Rest, Sheer Cold, and Double Edge. Each of them are wild, so they have 0 EVs. IVs are randomized, so it's possible that Kyogre has terrible IVs, while Groudon has amazing IVs during this encounter, with bad and good natures respectively. That said, we want Groudon to be slower than Kyogre, so its abilities activated last, thus activating Harsh Sunlight for the battle. During the actual battle in Emerald, there was erratic weather, which meant that the weather for battles would be either Harsh Sunlight or rain, so it's entirely possible that the battle between Kyogre and Groudon would have taken place in the Harsh Sunlight. Now, if Kyogre is faster, it could use Sheer Cold, a move that instantly defeats the opponent if the user is a higher level. Since they are the same level, the move then has 30% accuracy. This approach is statistically unlikely to be successful. The real question would be if Groudon could take a hit from Kyogre's Hydro Pump. With favorable IVs, in the Harsh Sunlight, Groudon lives. It uses Solar Beam and... oh. That's pretty underwhelming. Oh shit, Groudon loses. But what if Kyogre misses the first Hydro Pump? Groudon easily wins. Okay, so maybe Groudon would need some insane luck to pull off a victory in its fight against Kyogre. Regardless, this is supposed to be a matchup between two titans, two legendary beasts that are equally responsible for shaping the Earth as we know it. And yet, due to the tight matchup, people scoff at Emerald's Groudon-Kyogre fight, sapping the moment of tension. Their typings are simply bad for immersion. All of this is to illustrate making one box art legendary have a typing that is super effective against the complementary box art legendary is a bad idea. Lugia being psychic instead of water prevents this. Additionally, Lugia and Ho-Oh were introduced prior to Groudon and Kyogre, so this is potentially great foresight. With all this being the case, how do we then embrace Lugia's water type association? In the same vein as the Levitate solution, we can leave Lugia as Psychic Flying and give it a water-centric ability. Its current ability is Pressure. I have beef with Pressure and the way it's distributed. Without going on a huge tangent, Pressure seems to be the default ability for legendary Pokemon. This makes thematic sense. You know, they're supposed to be imposing, so they would exert pressure on their opponent. By that logic, I suppose you could give them all Intimidate instead, since they'd be intimidating, right? But we can all agree that would be whack. Pressure works so well for legendary Pokemon that you might stall a bit with, like Dialga, but otherwise it can feel mechanically incompatible despite fitting thematically. Lugia is notably bulky, so it could be used for stalling. That said, there are plenty of other legendaries with Pressure if you really want one. Besides, abilities can really help round out a Pokemon's theming, and that's exactly what we need for the Guardian of the Sea. One of the first possible abilities that comes to mind for me is Drizzle. It would make sense when you consider the Pokedex entries that refer to Lugia's ability to control storms. Crystal's entry specifically states, "It is said that Lugia appears when storms start." On top of that, Rain would give Lugia's Hydro Pump a power boost equivalent to the otherwise absent Stab. That said, you could certainly argue that Drizzle should remain exclusive to Kyogre, and the Pokemon who have it as a hidden ability. The ability is a significant part of Kyogre's identity, and as much as I'll vehemently defend Groudon, I don't want to disrespect Kyogre. And there are other abilities to consider anyway. Hydration could be a viable pick, especially if you want to stick with the rain theming. It cures non-volatile status problems if it's raining. Getting rid of status problems on a pretty tanky Pokemon could be a valuable defensive tool. Speaking of abilities that complement bulk in rain, Lugia could have Rain Dish. It doesn't make a lot of sense because there is no actual dish for Lugia to catch rain with. That said, it would help empower Lugia's defenses in a thematically appropriate way. If we're discussing rain-based abilities, I have to mention Swift Swim. Lugia's base speed of 110 certainly doesn't need a boost, but increasing it could definitely put Lugia over the top. There are also options that don't involve rain. Water Absorb would give Lugia an immunity to water-type moves, and in fact heal a quarter of its HP if hit by one. While it may make sense from a vibe standpoint to have the Guardian of the Seas unfazed by water attacks, I'm unsure of how beneficial it would actually be in practice. I'm not sure how often Lugia is really threatened by water-type attacks to begin with, so this ability may not have many chances to shine. A similar option would be Storm Drain, specifically Gen 5 onward Storm Drain, for the sake of avoiding damage and boosting special attack. This plays a similar role as Water Absorb in terms of immunity, but instead of healing, Lugia would gain a special attack boost. The one problem I see with this is that Lugia might then be a poor partner for any ally Pokemon using Water-type attacks in a double battle. I feel like they should be able to use the power of Water alongside the Guardian of the Seas, as opposed to forfeiting any offensive Water capability to it. To be perfectly honest, I'm not 100% confident that any of the changes I have detailed are the universally best choice. After all, changing a Pokemon's type or ability can make a huge difference in the way it's used. Different typing shifts its resistance profile, different abilities call for a total rethinking of how the Pokemon would synergize with various strategies. It will be hard to account for and appropriately weight all the pros and cons of each change. If I had to choose, I'd personally go with keeping Lugia's typing and giving it one of the rain-based abilities, but I'd be open to differing opinions. At the end of the day though, Lugia is Psychic Flying with pressure, and we can all stay mad about it.